You feel it, not in thoughts, not in words, in the cracking of bones, in the tightening of your throat, in the sudden trembling of your eyelids. It is not a memory, it is a presence. It is the return of what was meant to be buried. And suddenly you start to realize that what avoided your awareness has always been waiting in the shadows. You cannot name it. This feeling is heavier than your own body, as if someone beside you is breathing faster, shallower, in desperation, as if they keep trying to pretend that they can endure, but they can't. The silence that you carry within you suddenly ceases to be silence. You hear the echo of footsteps from old hallways. You hear the same voice you tried to forget. And you find that this person, someone whose face is still imprinted in your memory, is no longer hiding. He is drowning. She is drowning, not in water, but in guilt, the weight of which does not disappear. And you, though you tried to turn your head away, begin to realize that their pain did not vanish along with yours. That time is not a healer, but a prison. And that someone from your past is still tearing their insides apart because they cannot forget what they did to you. You know what I'm talking about. You know, that tension that wakes you in the middle of the night, that feeling that something is watching you, but not from outside, from within you, as if memories had their own eyes. And suddenly you begin to understand that what you tried to close off was not closed. It comes back. It still breathes. It still bleeds. And you feel their guilt as if it were your own. Because that's how a bond works, one that even silence hasn't broken. Because that's how a wound works, one whose scar can't heal. Because that's how the past works. It always finds a way back. Do you now begin to realize that their struggle is not only theirs, that what they suppress within themselves is constantly calling out to you? The first wave of pain that you rejected now returns with doubled force. Remember? That feeling that you were nothing more than a mirror for their anger, their fear, their hatred. And now that mirror is starting to crack. And the question torments you. Why now? Why at this moment does their guilt scream louder than your silence? Because they can't hold it in anymore. Because the burden, which was never yours, was always carried by you. Because your heart, even when it closed itself in silence, never stopped receiving signals. You feel it. Their guilt pierces your skin like a splinter you never pulled out. Every breath reminds you that someone out there, far or near, still fights their own demon. And that demon is you. Your face, your eyes, your silence. You once thought it was over, that they had left, that they had disappeared. But guilt cannot be buried. It always returns. And now you begin to realize that this past is not dead. When you stand in a crowd and suddenly your heart begins to beat faster, it's them. When you look in the mirror and don't recognize the gaze, it's them. When sleep suddenly escapes you because you feel someone's hand reaching out, it's them. It's them. Those who hurt you, those who stayed silent when you needed a word, those who fled, leaving you in ruins, and now they can't hold it in. Their guilt grows, their heart can't keep the rhythm, their mind loses balance, and you are being pulled back into that hell because the bond was never cut. You might think it's a coincidence, but you already know there are no coincidences. There's only energy which always finds its way back, and that energy has just caught up with you. The question is, do you really want to see their face when they finally fall? Because they are falling, right now, in the silence that begins to scream, in the lies that lose meaning, in the nights where every breath is a sentence. You feel it, because there is no escape from a past that returns with blood, sweat, and guilt. And now I ask you, have you already lived the moment when their suffering became your echo? This is not just a question, it's a warning. Because if you think this story ended years ago, you must realize that it is just beginning. And you are the key. Their guilt cannot bear the silence. It seeks your presence, your reaction, your gaze. They want you to know, to feel that they are the ones paying the price now. But you're paying with them. Because every wave of their guilt returns to you like an echo in the mountains that never quiets. And suddenly you see images, scenes you tried to erase, the same hands, the same words, the same moment when the heart broke and they looked away. Now it's coming back. Because they can't bear it. Because their soul does not allow them to stay silent. And you? You have to decide. Will you let this guilt submerge you, or will you learn to breathe even when they are drowning? Because the truth is, their downfall will not be your salvation. It will be another trial. Because every one of their cries will sound in your head like the voice of the past, which you never silenced. And you start to realize that what was meant to be the end is just the beginning of a new wait. Their wait, your wait, our wait. Because guilt never belongs to one person. It always finds a way to share the pain, and you already feel it, because someone from your past bears the burden of guilt, and they can't take it any longer. And you can't escape it. Not this time. Because the past always comes back when you are least prepared, and now is that moment. And I ask you again, have you ever felt this feeling? Has their guilt touched your blood? But this is just the beginning. You thought their cry was extinguished, that years of silence drowned out every echo, but you know well that silence never means the end. It is only the space where guilt grows, and now you start to realize that the burden they carry doesn't stop within them. It seeps through the air. It seeks you. You feel it in sudden waves of heat, in dark glances that suddenly return to your memory, in the void that suddenly appears in your breath. It is their presence. It's their guilt, which can no longer be contained within their body and tries to find a way out through your heart. Do you remember the moment when their eyes first turned away from yours? That look, which wasn't a look. That silence, which was sharper than any word. That was the beginning of their guilt. That was the moment when you began to carry a burden you were never meant to carry. And now they are falling. With each day more, with each breath deeper. Their body defends itself, but the soul has already surrendered. They cannot withstand, and you feel it. Sometimes you wake up with a strange trembling in your hands. Sometimes you look at strangers and have the feeling that you know their face, their shadow, their fear, because your inner self reacts, because your soul perceives signals that your mind tries to avoid, but you cannot escape. The past knows no bounds, it knows no time. It is like blood. It always circulates, always returns to the heart, and their heart beats in your rhythm. Do you understand what that means? It means that even if you thought their life was happening far away, that it had nothing to do with you. The truth is the opposite. Their guilt found its way into your inner self, and now you both pay the price. You ask, why now? Because masks do not last, because the body cannot lie indefinitely, because every night they try to sleep is a night in which they see your face. And your face is the verdict, and you feel it. Every scar you have reopens again. Every buried image comes back to you sharper than before, and suddenly you realize that your victories over the past were only temporary respites, that the wound never healed. Because their guilt holds your soul in a clenched hand, and now hands start to tremble. Their trembling becomes your trembling. Their despair becomes your breath. Their silence becomes your scream. Tell me, have you already had that moment when suddenly, for no reason, tears began to run down your face? Yes, that was the moment when their guilt touched your heart, because the bond was never broken. You can deny it. You can try to pretend it doesn't matter, but your body doesn't lie. Your dreams don't lie. Your silence doesn't lie either. They are there. They still exist in your blood, and they can no longer endure it. You feel it when their name suddenly returns to your memory, even though it hasn't been there for years. You feel it when an ordinary sound, an ordinary light, an ordinary smell suddenly opens doors to the past, because their guilt calls out. And the calling doesn't end until someone answers. And now I ask you, who will answer, you or them? Because if you don't answer, your heart will pay the price until you run out of strength. And if you do answer, you'll have to face what you've buried. And you start to realize that the choice was never simple, because the choice always means pain. They are already drowning. You stand on the shore and feel the water pulling you in with them. Each wave is another scene from the past. Each wave is the echo of your scream from years ago. And there's nowhere to run to. There's no place where your soul would be free from their guilt, because someone from your past carries the weight of guilt, and they can no longer bear it. And their burden has always been your burden, because that's how the bond works, which neither silence nor time nor distance could break. They can't endure, and neither can you, because your soul, though strong, is not indifferent. Your soul remembers every detail, every touch, every word, every moment, and now the memory turns into fire, and you burn together, in their guilt, in your silence, in the bond you didn't want, but which always existed. This is just the beginning. What you tried to hide is now breaking open. There are no more walls, no doors, no closed chests. Everything is open, everything is exposed, everything is naked. You and their guilt, you and their gaze, you and the echo that never stopped beating in your bones. And you begin to perceive that it wasn't them who were your prison. It was you. You who carried their silence, you who fed their burden, not knowing it did not belong to you. You who built inside yourself a chamber for their demons. But now the chamber is burning. You feel the fire tearing through your insides. You feel each layer of your skin becoming transparent, as if there were no longer a boundary between you and them. You are their pain. They are your shadow. And finally you see the truth. They do not fall just for themselves. They fall within you. They scream in your throat. They beg with your tears. And you can no longer pretend, because every drop of guilt they carry has seeped into you over the years. Because each of their silences was a knife stabbing into your heart. Because each of their breaths was your burden. And finally, you begin to perceive that what is destroying them now could have destroyed you long ago. But you survived. They did not. That is your advantage. That is your testimony. That is your wound, which bleeds, but still breathes. And they choke in their own bloodstream. And you ask yourself, what now? Do you watch them drown? Do you reach out a hand and pull them from the abyss? Do you turn away and let their guilt consume them completely? This is the moment where the heart tears in two. Because part of you wants revenge, wants them to suffer as you suffered, wants each day of their lives to be a punishment. But the other part of you, the deeper part, the part that still feels, still loves, still remembers, that part knows if they die in guilt, you die with them. Because a bond knows no boundaries. Because a bond is not severed by anger. Because a bond always returns in silence and in screams until someone decides it's the end. And you are right now standing in that place, on the edge. You see them hunched over, broken, with a soul clawed open like a raw wound, and you begin to understand that all this time, all this pain, all your nights in silence, they were meant to lead you here, to this moment, the moment when you can no longer escape the question, who are you, when you look into their guilty eyes? Because your identity has always been entwined with their mistakes, because your life has always been a reflection of their decisions, because your heart has always beaten to the rhythm of their sins. But now the rhythm changes. Do you hear it? Your heart beats harder, faster, as if it wants to tear you apart from the inside. Because this is an awakening, not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, but an awakening. And you start to realize that the guilt they carry doesn't have to be yours, that the burden that bowed you down doesn't have to rest on your shoulders anymore, that the echo that haunted you can finally fall silent. But for it to fall silent, you must look straight into their eyes, without running away, without being silent, without lying. You must see them burn in the fire of their own guilt, and you must speak the truth they couldn't bear all these years. Your truth, not their version, not their excuse, not their escape, yours. And when you speak it in your mind, you suddenly understand that they don't hold the key. You do. You are the gate. You are the light they fear. You are the proof that the past didn't kill everything, and that terrifies them, because their guilt wanted you destroyed. And yet you are still standing, breathing, trembling but alive. And they no longer are. And suddenly what has hurt for years becomes a blade in your hand, because you start to realize that you are not the victim of their guilt. You are the mirror in which their guilt sees its own reflection, and that is why they cannot endure, because you live, and they perish. And you stand on this boundary, feeling the air around you grow heavier, feeling the ground beneath you tremble, feeling each of your wounds open for the last time. But this time it is not the end, it is the beginning. Because in the moment they fall, you begin to rise. Because in the moment their guilt tears them apart, your soul frees itself from prison, and you feel that what was meant to break you becomes your weapon, that what was meant to be a curse becomes your strength, that what was supposed to bury you becomes your resurrection. And them? They are still drowning. But this time they are not pulling you down with them, because you finally saw that you don't have to die with them. And although their guilt still calls out, you no longer have to respond, because someone from your past bears the weight of guilt, and they can't endure it any longer. But you are beginning to endure, and that changes everything. If this truly touched your soul, if even one sentence opened a wound that you tried to bury, then don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe now, because the next words will hit where no one has ever reached before. Write in the comments what hurt the most. Don't censor your heart. Share this with someone who needs to stop pretending that their past no longer exists. This is not just a movie, it's a mirror, and a mirror always shows the truth.